Indigenous communities around the world face significant challenges in accessing quality education. Due to systemic racism, lack of resources, and other issues. In recent years, however, there has been an increased focus on the rights of Indigenous peoples and their access to quality education. This article explores best practices for improving Indigenous rights and access to quality education. First and foremost, governments must recognize the rights of Indigenous peoples and ensure that they are represented in the decision-making processes that affect them. This means creating space for Indigenous leadership and consultation, as well as instituting laws and policies that protect Indigenous peoples' rights to self-governance and education. In Canada, the federal government recently adopted the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples, which recognizes Indigenous rights to self-determination and equal access to education. Second, governments and educational institutions must prioritize the recruitment and retention of Indigenous teachers and administrators. Indigenous educators can provide a unique perspective on the educational experience and can help create a more equitable learning environment. Additionally, Indigenous educators can create a sense of belonging for Indigenous students, helping to improve student engagement and academic success. Third, governments and educational institutions must ensure that Indigenous students have access to culturally relevant curriculums. This means creating curriculums that incorporate Indigenous language, culture, and history, as well as promoting an understanding of Indigenous issues and perspectives. Additionally, educational institutions should provide culturally responsive support services to Indigenous students, such as mental health services and student assistance programs. Finally, governments and educational institutions must invest in the infrastructure and resources needed to ensure that Indigenous students have access to quality education. This includes providing adequate funding for schools in Indigenous communities, as well as investing in technology and other resources that can help bridge the digital divide. Additionally, governments should ensure that Indigenous communities have access to clean water, sanitation, and other basic necessities that can help improve student health and academic achievement. By taking these steps, governments and educational institutions can help ensure that Indigenous students have access to quality education and can realize their full potential. Through improved access to education, Indigenous students can become the next generation of Indigenous leaders and can help create a more equitable world.